Joined now by John Shannon, former executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada, the co-host of the Bob McCown podcast. Happy belated Canada Day to you, good sir.
You too, boys. Hope it was a nice one.
Yeah.
Were you stuck just following on the computer, or were you out playing golf?
No, we were here. Yeah.
No, honestly, Canada Day.
There wasn't much enthusiasm there, Blake.
No, well, you see, here's the thing. You work Canada Day for the umpteenth time in a row, John. Anyways, enough media wine. What did you make of what the Canucks did in free agency?
Well, I'm a Jake DeBrusk fan. I have been for a long time. I think that there was a time in Boston he didn't get a fair shake. I think he was in a much better position playing for Jim Montgomery than he was Bruce Cassidy. So from that perspective, I think that what the Canucks got was somebody that is going to pay the price and going to put the puck in the net, and everybody's going to enjoy having Jake around. So it's to me, it's a win-win. Good for Jake and good for Vancouver. So that's a positive. As far as some of the other stuff, I don't know enough about Sherwood to talk about what Sherwood is, but every team needs depth. Every army needs soldiers, and so I suspect that that's where that fit in. And a couple of the guys, including Vincent Desharnais on the back end, I think that Desharnais will. He's a good, solid worker. He's got a great attitude. He was, the classic case of great in the room, but he's still a work in progress.
Now the Canucks needed an elite winger for Elias Pettersson. Jake DeBrusk. Not an elite winger, but a good winger. But can he become more elite-ish with Elias Pettersson alongside?
That's a good question, Blake. Listen, DeBrusk can score. And is that what you need the elite winger to do? And, really show off Pettersson's playmaking abilities? Then Jake DeBrusk can do that. The one thing that, like Jake DeBrusk is closer in many ways to the style of play that JT Miller plays. Not a centerman, but Miller doesn't play center all the time either. But Jake's not afraid to be physical, not afraid to get in the corners. He still has a great deal of speed. So I think that if Pettersson can put the puck on his stick, and I see no reason why DeBrusk can't be a 35 goal scorer in the National Hockey League.
John, interested in your comment about the difference for DeBrusk from Cassidy to Montgomery. Would love if you explain further on that, and then maybe also tell us, this is a kid who scored 16 goals in 70 games as a rookie, 27 in 68 the next year, and yet seemingly we have heard his name in trade rumors for years here. So help us fill in the gaps there and explain those situations.
Well, I can't explain the trade rumors other than he and Bruce Cassidy were not the best of friends. There just was it was an oil and water scenario, and I think that it was an opportunity for Jake when Jim Montgomery showed up to prove that he can be a proven two-way winger in the National Hockey League, and I think for the most part he did that. There were lots of times where coming off injury when Bruce was coach that they would throw Jake right back to the Wolves. And I think there were some times it wasn't really fair on Jake's part to be that extra guy all the time. Sometimes coaches and players don't mix. And that was just, I think, the case between Cassidy and DeBrusk. And Jake has been looking for long-term security for a while. And, kept, the last couple of contracts in Boston were just bridge deals. So this to me is an indication that the Canucks have a great deal of confidence in him, and he liked the setup in Vancouver. How could you, with the way that Jake DeBrusk plays the game, how could you not want to play for Rick Tocchet?
Right. It's a perfect mix. He also gets to come with a couple of buddies. Well, I assume buddies from the Boston Bruins and Derek Forbort and Danton Heinen. That also makes a dressing room swap a little bit easier when you've got immediately familiar faces in the room.
I think that's fair. But if anybody knows Jake, He's got a perpetual smile on his face.
Yeah.
He will become a media darling. There's always, he loves talking to people. He comes by it naturally. Louis got the gift of the gab, and so does Jake. So I think it's a win-win. I really do. I think it's good for Jake to get back into a Canadian market. And I think it's good for the Canucks to improve their, I was going to say depth, but that's not fair. When there's an expectation he has to score goals now. And I know he can do it. And I obviously that Patrick and Jimmy think he can do it as well.
When you say Desharnais is a work in progress, explain there, sir.
Yeah. Listen, by the way, he's usually the tallest guy on the team. Now, I don't think he's the tallest guy on the team. But this has been a long journey for Vincent Desharnais to get to the National League. He worked his tail off. He still makes a couple of mistakes in his own zone, which is one of the reasons why during the Stanley Cup playoffs, the Oilers elected to put him in the press box a couple times. But that said, he's physical. He's not afraid to mix it up. He does have that great Condor-like reach that coaches like. I think if he can spend some time with Adam Foote and with Foote Gonchar, like he did with Paul Coffey, he will be a better hockey player. And so, from that perspective, it's one there where is he a 5'6" for Vancouver? Yeah, probably a 5'6" for Vancouver, but he certainly gives them depth. And he's another presence on the ice when he's there, and he's very physical. So but he's, his time in the National Hockey League is relatively short, guys. Yeah. And so from that perspective, he still needs to learn how to play the NHL game, and he's going to need that tutoring from Adam and Sergei to make it work.
Is he a fight, intimidate, protect his teammates type of guy?
Oh, yeah. No question. I mean, we're talking, if anything happens to one of the slighter guys, there's a face wash coming. There's a, big arm groping around you in the scrum. And he's a great teammate, and he's good for chemistry. I have no qualms about that when it comes to what Desharnais can add. Vinny was one of those guys around the room in Edmonton, always had a smile on his face, always had a positive attitude. And you can't, and I think that's one of the reasons why this summer there was a lot more interest in him than in previous years.
We've been talking for a while about how the NHL is just getting big again, because a lot of these big guys can move. A lot of them, not all of them. The Canucks have a massive blue line, John. Yeah. It looks like a blue line from the late 90s, for heaven's sakes. And the presumption is that all of them can move. We know Myers and Soucy. We've seen them up close. Desharnais, we got a good baptism of because of the 7-game series.
Sure.
But still, it'd be interesting to see him over an 82-game set. And then there's forward, of course, as well. 6'4", the smallest of the four guys there on the blue line. Is it too big? Do you see what Rick Tocchet and Patrick Allvin have in mind here? What do you think?
I don't think it's too big ever. All you have to do is go back 5 years and look at that defense for the St. Louis Blues that won the Stanley Cup. And it was Kenny Hitchcock who had them before they won the cup that gave them the nickname Condors. But the Edmondsons of the world, the Parekos, Alex Pietrangelo was one of the smaller guys at 6'4". So when you're trying to defend in a certain way, if you have size and reach, you can be different. And you're right. Tyler Myers has been reinvented. I mean, and he's a great puck moving defenseman, and now his defensive game seems to be back where everybody expected it to be. Same with Carson Soucy. I mean, so I as long as these guys can maintain their mobility, and by the way, for a guy 6'7", Desharnais is pretty mobile. Mm-hmm. I don't think size should ever be an issue for this defense being too big. I don't think you can ever be too big in the National Hockey League.
There's a sense they might need a puck mover. Do you think any nibbling around the edge? They got 8 signed defensemen because they've got Jolson and Friedman theoretically as well. Do you think there's a chance they're looking for one more puck moving defenseman, or do you think they're set?
Well, beyond Quinn and Hronik, who obviously are the number one pair, it would not surprise me that we see a little bit of movement still, and I think this is true for the whole league. The $1 billion that was spent yesterday, $1 billion. It's crazy. I think people now are going to take that step back, judge where they are. How close did they come to meeting all their goals? There are going to be teams that now are over the cap, and you can be over the cap by 10% in the summertime. So they're going to have to move some bodies, and it would not surprise me that if one of those guys is a puck-moving defenseman, the Canucks find a way to stick their nose into a conversation.
Or one of the other things we've been talking about is, if you want a puck-moving defenseman on both of the top 2 pairings, you split up Hughes and Hronik.
I'll tell you what, they are so good together. I'm not sure you want to compromise that. I think, listen, schedule came out today. So, we're 2.5 months. We'll buy Patrick and the team some leeway to try to, find a way to get another puck moving defenseman into the line. It wouldn't surprise me though.
Turn our attention to the draft over this past weekend at the Sphere in Las Vegas, John, because Blake and I thought it was a marvelous, and you don't always say this about the NHL, the award show, but Blake and I thought it was a marvelous live event, looked fantastic, and boy, if that's it for the live in person on the floor draft, they went out with a bang. What did your trained eye make of it, my friend?
Well, first of all, the NHL. So in my time at the league, we tried to get the time between picks down to 3 minutes. We could never do that. Teams always wanted 5. The networks always wanted 5. And we could never get the teams to get up there and just make a pick. They always had to say hello to the Carolina Ale House draft party and, everybody who's in 6 kids, it's just, all the crap that, drove you nuts, and your 3.5 hour draft ended up being 5 hours. Well, they accomplished a lot of that. So a lot of the housekeeping stuff was really well done. The teams were told that they were not allowed to do certain things. They were only supposed to be allowed 2 people on the dais. Some fudged it a little bit, but it still worked to everyone's benefit. Sphere is an unbelievable place. I'm not sure it transposed to television as well as they thought it would. It didn't for me, but I have a bias. All that stuff, which was magnificent to see, is still the background. It's not the foreground, it's the background. And the real story of the draft for me are the Macklin Celebrinis of the world. The Caden Lindströms of the world. Those are the guys that make the show. And so from that perspective, I have a bias that it was good. It was great. I'd love to know the bill. If the 3 of us tried to rent Sphere for a day, it's $450,000 a day. So I think that, you have to look at the accounting and say, well, I'm sure the league didn't pay that because Mr. Dolan is a shareholder in the National Hockey League. But it was good. I thought the 2 productions, I watched both ESPN and Sportsnet. I thought both productions were tight. They were well done. We saw more players. So life was pretty good that way. I have no issues with what the draft was on Friday night.
There's no question the Sphere, the whole immersive experience is supposed to be for the people sitting in the seats. So the curved screen and stuff like that, it's not catered to the TV audience, but I don't know. I saw it as looking bigger and fancier than it ever has before.
Then they accomplished their goal, Blake. Yeah. Then they accomplished their goal. That's there's a pragmatic side and there's a hey, watch us now side, and the watch us now side was was good. I mean, I have no issue.
You got to put on the nice bracelet, and necklace and look fancy.
I'm just glad that the Rangers were able to make a splash in the house that Dolan owns with the 30th overall EJ Emery, a defenseman from the U.S. national team.
Just wait, he's going to be amazing. He's going to prove you wrong.
Rangers are allowed to trade their pick this year.
Now, don't be picking on the New York Rangers. They're just one of 32.
Right.
One of 32 teams just eking out a meager living.
Trying to do it, yeah.
Finished in the conference final, but had that first round pick to make the splash at 30th overall for Mr. Dolan at the Sphere. Good deal.
Straight out of Compton, EJ Emery.
Schedule's out today, John. And it's, of course, a very, very tricky matrix. First and foremost, how many teams are they actually able to satisfy in terms of their preferences and requests?
Probably in the 100th percentile, none. But I suspect that most of the teams who provide dates, and these dates who had been provided, 18 months ago. And the team provides 50 dates and they have to work around that. So it's been an arduous task and a tough one when you consider that probably satisfying the 5 networks that exist between the two countries, TVA, Rogers, and now Amazon in Canada, and TNT and Disney in the United States. It's not a simple thing to do, but there are going to be teams that are going to be upset with road trips. There are going to be teams upset with back-to-backs. But lots of teams don't want to play a lot of games before Christmas. You look at the New Jersey schedule. I can guarantee you the New Jersey schedule is backdated heavily, whereas most of the Canadian teams are top-heavy for between now and Christmas Day. So it's a tough one to do. It really is. It's not a fun deal, but in the end, it's everybody's excited about the schedule. You can plan your vacations, you can plan everything you want to do, and we go from there. Plus, a 12-day break to play an international tournament in February.
It's just unbelievable when you scroll over and you see that massive block in February. You're just like, wow, that is a long time off for a large portion of the league.
Fellas, the Canucks last game is April 16th.
No. Listen, we're going to be in that that June 20 to 24 end of year again. 16 million people watch Game 7. 16 million people watch Game 7. And so if people are saying, well, you know what, nobody's interested in hockey.
Yeah.
It's good. It justified what the schedule will look like, at least till the end of the collective bargaining agreement.
Come on, Shannon. Some of that was based on the matchup of the Cup final as well, right? Like if that's Vegas, Florida, I don't think you're getting those sorts of numbers. But that's listen, Rogers has been waiting 10 years for a matchup. I know. I mean, just to get a Canadian team in, and you poo-pooed us on moving the schedule up, but LeBron reported this week the next CBA could be 84 games, fewer preseason games, and start right at the beginning of October to get on out by June 10th or so.
I will believe it when I see it.
Yeah. Okay.
I will. I mean, this is real estate now. In June, everything's gone off without a hitch. Awards were a hitch. A game, awards, draft, free agency, and the next, at least for the next year or two, there won't be travel involved for the draft for the teams. It'll all be done remotely, so it's not going to be as rushed. I mean, Saturday night, teams trying to get out of Sphere to go to the airport to get back for free agency. Some teams actually stayed in Winnipeg or stayed in Vegas, like Winnipeg.
We mentioned that Winnipeg and Washington both said to hell with it. We'll lose too much time. Hey, Trey, draft, free agency, players signing contracts with new teams while still drunk on champagne from the parade. That was a new one this year.
Yeah.
Lastly, you wanted in on the Hall of Fame.
Well, I used to be a real believer in the Hall system, and I used to respect it. Jim Gregory, who was a dear friend, was the chairman for a long time, and he convinced me that this was the way to do it. And but I've now changed. I mean, Alexander McGillney, who was nominated and did not get enough votes, that's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And I think it's time now that we have a lot more transparency and understanding of how the nominations work, how the voting works, so that we can ensure that those people who deserve to be in the Hall of Fame get to the Hall of Fame. And, the politics of it have to stop. To stop.
Can you defend the Coley Campbell nomination?
Yeah, I can. First of all, is Colin Campbell's a friend of mine. I make no bones about it. Mm-hmm. But Colin Campbell has had more impact in the last 2.5 decades to the success of the game and the speed of the game and the way the game has played than anyone else. Anyone else, Blake. And anybody who doubts that he doesn't deserve to the Hall of Fame should be ashamed of themselves because they haven't done the due diligence to understand his impact and importance to the game. I know he's an executive vice president and whatever, where the title is long as Pittsburgh, but Colin Campbell has worked his ass off to make this game better.
I guess I will sit here in my shame then, John Shannon, because this is a person who abused his power as director of officiating or director of hockey operations to intimidate officials in his charge to benefit his son's club. That right there.
No, I'm sorry. That is absolute utter.
That is let alone the Hockey Hall of Fame. It's all there in emails, John. It's all there in emails.
I am telling you right now.
I guess
Matt, listen, Matt, we can
miss that day.
We can agree to disagree. Colin Campbell deserves to be in the Hockey Hall of Fame. I will stand up for that for the rest of my life.
What do you when you say politics, what do you mean? That the politics at the Hall? What do you mean by that?
Well, I think personal opinions and vendettas of people being kept out of the Hall exist, and they have existed constantly for the last 30 years. I think that when the cycle of voters changes, you get a new editorial philosophy in what that 18-person panel votes on. There were players that were not allowed in because they were treated poorly in a post-game event, and so the person never forgave them. And that's not right. The Hockey Hall of Fame deserves to be a place where the best players, best builders, best female players, and officials are honored for their contributions to the game, not because they were a prickly personality or because we didn't like the way that they got interviewed one day after a game. That's not right.
Yep.
That's not right.
On that point, we can agree, Mr. Shannon. Thank you for the...
We can always agree on disagreeing too. So it's good.
Mm-hmm. Have a great week, John. We'll catch up next week.
Talk to you, boys. Have a great weekend.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.